Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Director for the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies, Chris Moriello.
Good evening. Could I ask everyone to stand for the presentation of the colors and remain standing for the national anthem? Thank you. You can be seated. Welcome to the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies annual Holocaust Remembrance Ceremony. Welcome to everyone who could join us here in person, as well as our remote audience, which is viewing from around the world. My name is Chris Moriello. I'm the Director of the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Salem State University. At this time, I want to once again thank the Peabody Veterans Council, the Jewish War Veterans of the USA, North Shore Post 220, as well as the 26th Infantry Yankee Division Veterans Association for joining us tonight. 2025 marks the 80th anniversary of the liberation of concentration camps and death camps by Allied forces at the end of World War II. Tonight we pay special tribute to the 26th Yankee Division, made up mostly of men from New England who liberated the Gusen concentration camp, which was a subcamp of the Mauthausen camp, in May of 1945. And if I have my math and history correct, it was May 5th, 1945. Like all liberators, the encounter with the Holocaust and survivors was a life-transforming event. To honor their service, we would like to invite Bob Coleman, commander of the 26th Infantry Yankee Division Veterans Association, to speak on behalf of these brave men. Bob?
I'm Bob Coleman, commander of the 26th Yankee Infantry Division, North Shore Chapter, Veterans Association. Tonight we are here on the 80th anniversary of the Holocaust, in which the 36th divisions liberated camps throughout Germany and saved thousands of human lives. The Holocaust began in Germany after Hitler was appointed and became Chancellor of Germany. In January 1933, immediately following, Hitler and the Nazi Party arose to power. The Nazi excluded Jews from economic, social, culture, and Germany itself. From 1933 to 1945, the Third Reich was the governing rule in Germany. The Nazi Party rounded up Jews around Germany and Europe. In March of 1933, the Nazi parties established the concentration camps in Poland and Germany. The purpose of these concentration camps were to incarcerate people whom the Nazi Party perceived to be a security threat to Germany, to eliminate individuals and murder them by from keeping them away from public view after their deaths. To exploit the forced labor, they turned around and did their production from the prisoners instead of the people themselves. The 26th Yankee Infantry Division was activated for World War II in September of 1944 and quickly moved through northern France, fighting through Europe, where Hitler and the German army launched a final offensive at the Battle of the Bulge. The Battle of the Bulge was intended for Germany army to split and smash British, Canadian, and Allied U.S. forces. The German army plan was to roll back the Allies from entering Germany. U.S. and Allied forces managed to delay just enough time to get soldiers into position at the Battle of the Bulge. Increasing pressure made the German army to pull back their troops during the first week in January 1945. The Battle of the Bulge was won decisively by the Allied and U.S. forces. If the Battle of the Bulge was won by the German army, it would have been impossible for the Allied forces to negotiate peace and enter in Germany and see what was going on with the prisoners. On May 5th, 1945, the Yankee division overran Gusen concentration camp. As the Allied bombing raids took place in Germany, they used war productions underground so they can keep the prisoners away from the view of the public. The German SS and Nazi planned to demolish the tunnels with the prisoners inside. The advance party of the 26th Yankee Infantry Division ensured that no such plans would be carried out. By doing that and stopping the destruction of the tunnels, the 26th Yankee Infantry Division saved over 20,000 lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you for the service of the 26th Yankee Division in liberating the concentration camps. Once again, my name is Chris Moriello. I'm the director of the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Salem State, and we really welcome you to this ceremony. The center has organized this event with the community for the last 10 years. Prior to that, there was a celebration or a commemoration here for over 25 or 30 years, sponsored by the Holocaust Center Boston North, and I saw Harriet Wax on my way in, who was one of the co-directors of that center. So thank you, Harriet, for launching this. I've been doing this coming to this for some 25 years now, I realize. Today we come together as a community to remember and commemorate the 6 million Jewish victims and millions of other victims of the Nazi genocide between 1933 and 1945. But we also know that we are gathering in a time of unprecedented global and international crises. We have a sense of despair about the humanitarian and human rights disasters in Sudan, Haiti, and Gaza. However, since January, we can turn our gaze inward to the United States, where we are experiencing the immediate threats to democracy and human rights. While I do not think it's appropriate to politicize a Holocaust Remembrance Ceremony, I believe it would be irresponsible of me as a leader of a center committed to democracy and human rights not to bring to attention to what I see as the dangers of authoritarianism emerging in our own country. Authoritarian populism is not fascism, and it is not Nazism. But like these ideologies, it has the potential to threaten and ultimately erode the basic political and human rights and challenge the values and norms upon which our democracy is built. In its essence, the Holocaust is about the fragility of democracy and what can happen when an authoritarian regime rejects political and human rights and targets individuals and groups, Jews, Roma Sinti, members of the LGBTQ community, Jehovah's Witnesses, communists, and political opponents. They have their rights taken away. We hear in the testimonies of survivors that their rights were incrementally removed as the Nazis destroyed the institutions, systems, and norms designed to protect them and limit the authority of the government. Universities and students were attacked and their leaders were arrested. Loyal government employees and their departments were shut down and replaced by politically reliable Nazis. Hundreds of years of German precedent and law was voided. Stormtroopers replaced the police as the arm of government, and while the new conservative German political party in the Reichstag stood by idly and thereby enabled the dictatorship to take hold. But most dangerously was the misuse and weaponization of language. Jews and opponents of the regime were seen as a dangerous virus infecting the body of the folk or the people. Polish Jews escaping anti-Semitism in Poland, living as refugees in Germany, became, quote, illegals to be arrested and removed. Anyone who opposed the regime was branded a communist, an insurrectionist, or an asocial who would, starting in 1933, be sent to Dachau concentration camp, where they would be incarcerated outside of the power of the judiciary. The rights of individuals melted away. The center could not hold. And in a short time, the German democratic experiment was replaced by the most murderous regime in human history. History never repeats itself, but it does echo and provide warnings for future generations. Indeed, if history has taught us anything, it is that when the rights of one group are threatened and eroded, then the rights of others will suffer a similar fate. Protestant pastor and theologian Martin Niemöller, who spent 8 years in Nazi concentration camps, warned us of this. Tonight, as we honor the memory of the victims of the Holocaust, I would like us to keep in mind his words from a well-known poem. First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. At this time, I would like to invite up the rabbi, I think it's Rabbi Scheinheit, for the candle lighting ceremony.
Ner Adonai Nishmat Adam, the light of God shines in the human soul. The memorial candle is reminiscent of the eternal flame, the unending promise of divine comfort and hope. As the flame of the candle flickers, so too does the eternal light of the soul, pure and bright, undiminished by time. Today, we gather to remember the millions of innocent souls, Jews, Roma, Slavs, queer folk, and more, murdered in the catastrophe of the Shoah. We also honor the perseverance of survival, those who built a future amid the destruction. As we light these memorial candles this evening, we remember the purity and brightness of the Jews of Europe, their innocence and goodness, the world that was, now preserved in our memories. we kindle these lights so that the memories of the victims of the Shoah will continue to shine within us. We are their everlasting memorial.
I'd like to thank the Salem State Community Chorus for that wonderful rendition, and also thank the students from the Higgins Middle School under the direction of their teacher, Vinnie Raponi, for participating in our ceremony and bringing down the flowers in memory of the Holocaust victims. Thank you very much. At this time, I would like to introduce some of our speakers for tonight. The first person I'm introducing tonight would be the president of Salem State University, John Keenan, who has the most difficult job as being president of a university these days. So, John.
Thank you, Professor Moriello, and good evening, everyone. It's an honor to join you for this deeply meaningful remembrance ceremony. Tonight, we come together to reflect, to learn, and to honor the resilience of those who endured unimaginable hardship. We are privileged to have Janet Singer Applefield and her daughters join us this evening. Their presence allows us to connect with the profound history they carry and the lessons they offer all of us. Let us take a moment to welcome some of our distinguished guests. Representative Sally Kearns is here with us this evening. Thank you, Representative. Members of the Peabody Veterans Community, the Salem State Community Chorus, who you've heard recently, the North Shore Rabbi Council, and the student awardees of the White's Upstander Award. Your participation makes this event even more significant. This evening, we have the privilege of hearing Janet Singer Applefield's perspective on the impact of the Holocaust on her and her family's lives, a story of courage, of strength, and tenacity. On September 1st, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland, her life was forever altered when she was just a 4-year-old child. Janet, whose given name was Gustava, survived despite unimaginable odds when 90% of the Jews in her town did not. In 1947, she arrived in America and faced yet another challenge, the demands of assimilation. This included changing her name to Janet to adapt to her new reality. These experiences, as we can only imagine, not only shaped her life, but also deeply impacted her family's trajectory. Tonight, Janet and her daughters will share how their firsthand and secondhand Holocaust experiences have shaped their family history, a testament to resilience across generations. We are profoundly grateful to Janet and her family for sharing their reflections with us. Their stories remind us of the importance of preserving memory, confronting history, and fostering dialogue that paves the way for healing and unity. I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to the Combined Jewish Philanthropies and the Congregation Ahabat Shalom Religious Grant Fund for sponsoring this ceremony. Of course, I want to thank Professor Moriello for his leadership and that of the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Salem State, including Assistant Director Regina Cazzolina, Program Assistant Lynn Blair, and Grad Assistant Grace Haggerty. The Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies continues to advance research, education, and public programming in Holocaust education, comparative genocide, conflict studies, and human rights. Their commitment ensures that students, teachers, and community are empowered to combat racism, prejudice, ethnic hatred, and abuse of authority. This remembrance ceremony serves as a profound reminder of our commitment as the Commonwealth Civic Engagement University. By encouraging inclusion, education, and open dialogue, we uphold our mission to ensure our students have their educational goals while contributing to a global society as ethical and engaged community members. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this evening's remembrance ceremony. Now, please join me in welcoming back Professor Moriello. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to introduce a video segment that was produced by Congressman Seth Moulton, who is currently in Washington, where we want him, working, but he did take some time out and sent us this message, so we want to share that with you tonight.
Hi, I'm Congressman Seth Moulton. I want to thank the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Salem State University, as well as Combined Jewish Philanthropies, for hosting this important ceremony. Although I regret that I cannot be there with you in person, I'm honored to join you virtually. Elie Wiesel famously wrote, "Never shall I forget those things, even if I am consigned to live as long as God himself." Each year that passes, the horrors of the Holocaust descend a little further into the past. Yet each year that passes, our collective responsibility to say never again grows even more important. Never again will be the darkest, most hate-filled of ideologies like anti-Semitism be allowed to infect an entire society. Never again will we look away when injustice is happening around us. Never again will we hesitate to act. This year, as we remember the unspeakable horrors of the Holocaust, we also honor the pure heroism of the Allied soldiers who liberated the concentration camps in 1945. These troops, our greatest generation, came face to face with evil. We've all seen the haunting images in grainy video footage from those days. The skin and bones, blank stares, death, and destruction. They made it possible for the world to see the true nature of what the Nazis had done. Today, I'm especially proud to recognize local veterans and groups like the Peabody Veterans Council and the 26th Infantry Yankee Division Veterans Association, whose members helped liberate the Guzen camp in May 1945. And while 80 years have passed, the mission of the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies is more urgent today than ever. With the alarming rise of anti-Semitism and new threats to democracy at home and abroad, it's critical to remember that the Holocaust did not begin with violence. It began with a slow creep of words, with politics and laws, and with indifference. In honor of every life extinguished during the Holocaust, and every soldier, Marine, sailor, or airman who died fighting the Nazis, we must commit to speaking out against injustice every single day. And we must speak out for our neighbors who may not have a voice. Nothing can be taken for granted. The universal lessons of the Holocaust teach us about the fragility of democracy and the critical role each of us must play in safeguarding human rights. It is our shared duty to remember, to educate, and to act. Thank you for everything you do to preserve memory, fight hate, and defend the values that make us stronger together. May we honor the past with our actions and build a future defined by justice, dignity, and peace. Thank you.
Thank you, President Keenan, and thank you, Representative Moulton. This is the part of the program where I'd like to introduce our keynote speakers and our discussion around the story of survival of Janet Applefield. In 1947, when her father insisted his 12-year-old daughter dictate to him the story of her survival, being a hidden child during the Holocaust has become central to Janet Singer Applefield's identity. Initially, she believed her experiences were insignificant compared to those who survived the camps. But in the early 1980s, like many other child survivors at the time, she started sharing her story. In 2024, she published her memoir, Becoming Janet, Finding Myself in the Holocaust, which chronicles her experiences surviving the Holocaust, hidden in plain sight by a handful of Polish neighbors. Tonight, we're going to present a very different format as we invite Janet and her surviving children, Deb Milley and Jonathan Applefield, who will participate via pre-recorded video, to join us on stage. First, there'll be a short introduction by Janet of her amazing story of survival, followed by a discussion with her children about growing up second generation in the shadow of the Holocaust. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage. All set, Janet?
Yeah.
All right. So tell us a little bit in a summary of your story, Janet.
So I was born in Krakow, Poland, and I lived with my mother, father, baby sister in a little town 50 miles south of the city of Krakow. And I lived there with a large extended family, grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles. I have wonderful memories of those first few years of my life because I was so loved. But everything came to an abrupt end September 1st, 1939, when the war broke out. So my parents made desperate attempts at escaping. We made several trips or attempts. And when they had run out of all of their options, they made this agonizing decision in order for me, hopefully, to survive, to give me away. So one day, my parents sat me down and explained that I was going to go with Maria, who was a nanny to one of my cousins. She was my first caregiver. After that, I was passed to another caregiver who was a cousin that I had never met. She was living on falsified Christian papers. She had a false identity. She was able to obtain a birth certificate from a Catholic priest of a little Polish Catholic girl who died. And I took on this little girl's identity. Her name was Krystyna Antoszkiewicz. That was my new name. So I went to live with her. She was very mean to me. She used to beat me with a fireplace poker. When I cried for my mother, she would say, "Your mother is dead. She's never coming back for you." One day, she was meeting her boyfriend in Krakow, and she took me with her. And when we arrived in Krakow, she took me into a church, and she told me to sit and wait for her. So I waited for her. She was going across the street to meet her boyfriend in a cafe. I waited and waited and waited for hours, but she never came back for me. Finally, I walked out of the church, crossed the street. The whole street was cordoned off. I overheard people talking, and I heard that the Gestapo had come, and they arrested everybody in that cafe. So here I was, 7 years old, walking up and down the street, crying. I had no idea what to do. Suddenly, a woman came up to me and very quickly put me under her cape. And she asked what happened, why are you crying? And I explained that my cousin was in the cafe. And she was gone. I said, "Could you please take me to the bus? I was going to go back to my village." She said no. She took me into the same building where the cafe was, but upstairs to the apartment of a woman by the name of Alicia Gołąb. Alicia said I could stay there. But however, I didn't stay there. I was sent over to a farm that was owned and operated by the Catholic Church. Alicia's brother-in-law was the administrator of the farm. So I remained on the farm until the war ended. So we were liberated by the Russians. And when the war ended, there was a knock on the door when I was still living on the farm. And there was my cousin's father. He came to get me. I didn't want to go with him because I was scared of him, just the way I was afraid of his daughter. But I had to leave because he was my relative. So I lived with him and his wife. So we were liberated by the Russians, and so when I was living with him and his wife, and then one day he said to me, "Pack your suitcase, we're leaving." He and I walked to the Jewish refugee center, and so I ended up living in the refugee center. I was just 10 years old. And along came a woman, her name was Lena Kuchler. She came every day looking at lists of survivors because she was searching for her family. And she came across this room full of children and made a decision that she had to open 2 orphanages. So I went to live in an orphanage. And one day, Lena went back to the refugee center to pick up some provisions, and she overheard a man asking about his child, and she said, "Well, can you describe what your daughter looks like?" And he said, "Well, she has long blonde hair, light complexion, green eyes, and she has a birthmark on her left thigh." She thought for a moment, and she said to him, "I think I have your daughter." So she called me down to her office, and she said to me, "Can you pick up your skirt just a little bit?" And she was looking at my birthmark. And then she said, "I have a wonderful surprise. Your father has survived." And I'll always remember the reunion with my dad because I was so frightened of him because he looked like a skeleton. So he couldn't take me right away, but in time he was able to take me, and we went back to our town. But anti-Semitism after the war was extremely severe. And very soon my father realized that we couldn't stay there, so we moved to Krakow. And one day he and I were walking in the park, and he said, I have something very serious to discuss with you. And he said, it's very terrible for us to stay in Poland. We can't remain here. It's very dangerous. So he said, you have two uncles. One uncle lives in Palestine, your Uncle Adek, and your Uncle Jack lives in America. Where do you want to go? And I said, I want to go to America. And he said, why? Why do you want to go there? And I said, because I heard that money grew on trees. So, of course, it wasn't a simple matter to pick up and move. It took about 2 years to get proper papers. So we immigrated to America in 1947. And I was almost 12 when I came. I had never gone to school. My uncle took me to register me for school. And right there in the school office, he said to me, what name do you want? You have to have an American name. So I thought about it for a moment, and I came up with the name Janet, because we had a cousin who was French. She lived in Paris, France. She was very beautiful and glamorous, and she had long red nails. So I said, Jeanette, and my uncle turned to the school secretary, and he said, her name is Janet. So that's how I became Janet. So we also had a very serious problem because we came on a medical visa because my father was shot when he was in the concentration camp, and the bullet lodged under his cheekbone. So we came on a medical visa for my father to get his bullet removed. And that was good for 90 days. In 90 days, we had another visa to go to Venezuela. The only way we could remain in this country is my father got married to an American citizen. So the family looked around, and they found him a wife. So in that very short period of time, I had a new stepmother, a new name, new appearance, everything was new. So I know when I'm no longer here that my legacy will continue because my daughter and my grandchildren will continue to tell my story. And now that I have my memoir published, I know the story is out in the world. So thank you.
Thank you, Janet. So before we begin our discussion, I just want to recognize that there were 3 siblings. The eldest son, David, passed away in 2020, but we're lucky to have Deb and then Jonathan as a remote recording for this discussion. This is a little bit different format, but we really wanted to get at some of the issues of growing up in the shadows of the Holocaust. So I'm going to have a question. I'll start right away with Deb, and the first question is a 2-part question. How did you first learn about your mother's experiences during World War II and the Holocaust, and was that story complete?
Thank you, Chris. So I don't remember my mother ever sitting us down and sharing her story of survival. My grandfather had a thick Polish accent. My mother didn't have much of an accent, although we did tease her about the few words that she said with a little Polish accent attached. So I really don't remember that. But as, also it wasn't a very popular time. Survivors weren't really speaking that much. And my mother certainly, I think, was just trying to, fit in, blend in, and it wasn't a formal conversation. But in 1983, my mother and I, along with a very dear Holocaust survivor who sadly since passed, Rena Finder, and Rena's daughter, Anita, the 4 of us took a bus to Washington, D.C. to the first gathering of American Holocaust survivors. And I made a sign for my mother to carry with a picture of her mother on it that said, "Have you seen Maria Nobel? Last seen in Niepołomice, Poland." And it was such a pivotal point for me because it really, I mean, I've always been incredibly close with my mother, but it was such an added conversation to mother-daughter loss and fear and anxiety, and I think it's sort of what started to plant seeds for me.
Thank you, Deb. Now we'd like to hear from Jonathan, who has a pre-recorded message on the same question about how he learned about his mother's story.
How did I first learn about my mother's story? Actually, I didn't learn first about my mother's story. I really learned more about my grandfather's story. And I would say I was around 9 years old. I peg it to that date because that's when my grandfather started writing a diary, his recollections, and he dedicated to my late brother, David. And David was around 18 or 19, and it was really important for David to know about our roots. And it wasn't just a hobby; it was a deep philosophical and kind of spiritual and artistic compulsion that David had. And if it wasn't for that, I don't think we would be where we are today in terms of our knowledge. So it was through my grandfather's diary, 1975, I was age 9. And then shortly after that, more stuff happened. My brother went to Poland. I remember around age 11 when he went, or 12, and my grandfather told him various addresses to go to and people to look up, and those pictures, they're in black and white mostly, they really made a big impact on me. And then around 84, we went as a family, and at that point, in 84, when I was, around 16 or so, or 17, that's when I learned my mother's story, because we actually met the family that held and kept her for most of the war. And up until then, that wasn't a big part of the story. And it's a lot more complicated than that, but I'll keep it to that. Thanks.
Thank you, Jonathan. Janet, this is your chance to correct the memory of your children. Is that the way you remember it? And did you tell your story, and as you learned more, did you tell more to your children?
I did not speak about my experience for a very long time, mainly because I didn't even consider myself a survivor. I thought the people who experienced concentration camps, they were the survivors. But over time, I realized that I had something important to share, and it wasn't until, I would say, early 80s that my friend Rena Finder brought me to Facing History and Ourselves, and that's when I started to speak about it.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. So the next question, we're going to start with Jonathan's response, but the question he is responding to is, in what ways did the memory of the Holocaust inform the parent-child relationship? Do you remember moments or incidents where your mother referenced the Holocaust experience or passed on specific lessons to guide you based on the Holocaust? So here's Jonathan's response.
I realized that this question kind of escaped my attention, and I don't think it's accidental. It's kind of a painful question. I don't think it's the answer that people would expect. My mother actually didn't have a different role that was explicitly dictated by her experiences. But in some respects, she was always protected and sheltered by us. And I think she even chose my father as a type of savior-like figure. But the part that I kind of blocked out and that's painful to share publicly is my dad was pretty arbitrary in his temper and control. And, my mother didn't have the tools, and the way her adaptive strategies for survival came into play was just to keep her head down and bear a lot of uncertainty in our lives, and a lot of tension, a lot of manipulation, and there was a lot of fear in my house. And we all sort of managed by not standing up and making an overt force to defend ourselves. And so, I do think that was dictated by the larger historical circumstances that my mother came out of. And I think we're all actually turning a new leaf in the last 10 years. So, yeah. In terms of specific lessons, no. I don't think we learned any specific lessons. But I will say my mother has been a courageous, courageous in exploring her own history, sharing it with us. And in a way, we've all developed a very high level awareness of the dynamics of that period in time. And I think we're stronger because of it. We're not bitter about it. I think the goodness of the people that saved my mother really translates to an openness and healthiness that we all have to this day. So that's the answer. Yeah.
Chance to respond.
Every descendant of a Holocaust survivor wears this legacy very differently and views it with a different lens. And I think that is very apparent between my two brothers and I. My brother David was a writer, as John shared. He was the one who was very brave and courageous and went back to Poland in his early 20s, researching my mother's past, confronting people from their past. And Jonathan was the kind of family historian and family tree keeper. My perception was always a much more emotional connection to my mother's story. It was not the academic pursuit. I grew up feeling that my job was to protect my mother at all cost. That's not I don't say that, with courageously. I think children have a right to be children, but I just always felt that my mother needed me. It was more like we were siblings, and I was the older sibling. But I really, that was really the lens of which I saw my legacy. And also, as John touched on, my mother lived with a mantra that peace at all costs. Now, of course, that was how she survived, and she knew how to manage and maneuver. But I adopted that too, and I don't think that's a very healthy way to live. And of course, as I became an adult, that was something that I had to overcome, and probably still work on that today. I've always been the family peacekeeper. Everybody finds their niche in a family. That was mine.
Thank you, Deb. Next question is, there has been a lot of ongoing research about first, second, and now third and fourth generation Holocaust memory. Do you think the memory and trauma of the Holocaust is passed down in family histories or behaviors? And can you give an example? Deb, we'll start with you.
I really sound like a troubled soul. I definitely think the answer for me is yes. As I said, I feel like I was born with this story, and I was the child of a traumatized child. So with that said, I definitely grew up with a lot of fear and anxiety, and my biggest example of that is that from the time I was very, very small, I was afraid to sleep in my own room by myself. that actually went in through college. I wouldn't stay in a dorm room unless my roommate was there. And I developed a bit of an unhealthy relationship between anger and abandonment. So for me, anger, upset, translated into abandonment, and I was always very, very fearful of my parents dying, of my parents leaving. So yeah, I certainly feel that I carried some of that trauma, that I was born with that.
Thank you. I'd like to hear what Jonathan has to say about this question of generational trauma and memory.
I have thought a lot about transgenerational trauma, and honestly, I'm pretty critical or skeptical of that notion. I feel like more of my the weight and the difficulties that have been transmitted from my parents came from my father's side, and I wasn't very comfortable with adopting some sort of framework that made me feel like a victim of history, or shouldering a burden by it. And I must say, even though it sounds counterintuitive, that despite the tremendous dislocation that occurred in my mother's childhood, she was pretty well adjusted as an adult. She did. When I think about her, the narrative, she was passed between some very loving people, and she very, very narrowly escaped hard jolts to the psyche. But I shouldn't be speaking for her. I know there were abusers, and there was fear, and there was trauma, and there was the murder of her mother. So I'm not minimizing all that, but I wouldn't say that transgenerational trauma applies to me, except insofar as my mother was very much one of the children in the family, and so we had kind of the hidden child was always very much part of my mother's identity. There was the role of us kind of sheltering her and protecting her, and never feeling like she was a shield against the forces in the world. We were more watching her kind of roll with the punches and adapt to the environment we were in. So maybe in that sense, there was something about the war that percolated through my childhood.
Thank you, Jonathan. The final question is a broad question, and it would be, given the experience and family life, do you feel a special responsibility to speak about the Holocaust, genocide, and human rights? So once again, we'll return to Jonathan's response to this question.
Regarding some sort of responsibility that I might shoulder in terms of telling the story, speaking up on behalf of people whose human rights are infringed upon, I want to say no, I don't feel I have a special responsibility. In fact, I feel like I don't want to be given any extra heavy lifting. I feel like being truly free of that history would be the best way to triumph and rise above it. Does that mean I'm oblivious to the perspective that I can bring to this? No, I'm very aware of it. I like to further any type of scholarship, but I do feel this is more of a personal kind of identity, something that I hold in terms of my spiritual or philosophical ideas about who I am and who I become because of my mother and because of my grandfather. And what I really learned from especially my grandfather was a certain lightness of being, a kind of humor and resiliency through rejecting any type of heavy bitterness or messaging. And I'm resistant to become an advocate and use the Holocaust as a part of a campaign. of any sort. It seems like it's too nuanced, and at this point in my life, I'm not going to address the world based on this history.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. And Deb, I assume you have a very different perception and different answer to this question.
I do have a very different viewpoint. I have been accompanying my mother to most of her speaking engagements over the last year, and in fact over the last 15 years. I mean, I have watched her speak, I have spoken alongside her, both with her and on my own, and I feel a tremendous responsibility to carry this legacy and carry this torch, and having the honor to watch how many people, and mostly young people, but she speaks between 4,000 and 5,000 people each year. It's a lot. It's a lot. And to watch her give live testimony and to watch her touch so many people. I mean, I often say to her, if you're speaking to an audience and you reach one person, that's a win. And to witness that firsthand has really just solidified that I must carry this story. And I'm honored that it has been a family journey getting her memoir published. I know that for the last 10 years that her dream was just to have that out in the world while she was still alive, and I'm thrilled and honored that as a family my children have participated in that. I just think that if audiences can't hear live testimony, then I'm the next best thing. So,
and thank you, Deb, for all you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to give the final word on this panel to Janet, of course. Given your experience in the family life, do you feel special responsibility to speak about the Holocaust, genocide, and human rights, Janet?
Chris, may I address a prior question?
You can do anything you want, Janet.
The question that had to do with parenting. So I feel great pain to hear my children say that they regarded me as one of their siblings, and I'm not being defensive, but I have thought about that a lot. And I came to this country when I was 12, and 7 years later, I got married, and at age 19 and age 20, I had my first child. I certainly was not equipped, and I didn't have the tools to become a parent, and I didn't have role models, and so we lived in a very difficult household with a lot of contention and trouble and fear, and yeah, there were issues, a lot of issues. So I did the best I could. But now, in terms of the last question about responsibility, I feel a very strong sense of obligation and responsibility because I'm a witness of history, and I'm also the voice for all those people whose voices were so brutally taken from them. So I know that I will speak as long as I'm able to speak about this and teach about the Holocaust, because the Holocaust is not only a history lesson, it teaches so many universal truths. And as we know, Holocaust did not start with gas chambers. It started with voices and words. So, as I said, I will continue until I no longer can do this, and I know that Debbie and my grandchildren will continue to my legacy. So I'm very grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that was a fascinating conversation, so we can give it another round of applause, please, for our panelists. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your insights and sharing your family history with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'll get you.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Deb.
Thank you.
That was fun. At this time, I would like to give out and to present our Sonia Schreiber-White's Upstander Awards. Each year, the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies awards the Sonia Schreiber-White's Upstander Award to students or students who stand up to hate and act as an upstander among their peers. This award is named after survivor Sonia Schreiber-White and selected by her family. This year, we had excellent nominations from the students' teachers. I would like to call up honorable mention Haley Duffy, 8th grade student at North Reading Middle School. Here you go, Haley. Congratulations. Thank you. Our award winners this year are 4 young men, Charlie Chused, Theo Adams, Mike Day, and Ben Skanga from the Ephraim Curtis Middle School in Sudbury, Massachusetts. They were nominated by their teacher, Mike Nagel, who's a teacher and student in the Holocaust and Genocide Studies Certificate Program at Salem State University. These 4 young men are amazing. They personally experienced anti-Semitism and racism in their school, and instead of sitting on their hands, they took action. And they committed to work and planned to provide anti-Semitism education to more than 800 students in their school for their 8th grade civic action project. So please welcome up the 4 courageous young men. Where are you guys? Yeah. Theo? There you go. Congratulations. Thank you very much. Mike? Congratulations, Mike. Thank you. Charlie? Congratulations, Charlie. And you must be Ben. Congratulations, Ben. Turn around, take the applause. Take care, guys. Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to welcome up the members from the Rabbi Council, Rabbi Adler and Cantor Seth Landau, as well as Rabbi Shanhite, for the memorial prayers.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the souls of our brethren who perished in the Shoah, men, women, and children of the house of Israel, who were slaughtered and suffocated and burned to ashes. May the memory endure and inspire deeds of charity and goodness in our lives. May their souls thus be bound up in the bond of life. May they rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. I ask you to please rise. Achen bamromin Hamsemenucha Nechana Tachat Kanfei Hashkina B'malok doshim otarim Kezahar harakia Mazhirim Nishmud kolachenu Bnei Yisrael shenitbechu Vashoah Anashim nashim v'tov Shenechneku v'shenisrefu v'shenerego Shemastro et nafsham al kiddush Hashem Began Eden Tidhimenu chatam Ana barachamim Tastirem beseter Kanafecha liolamim Utzror bitzror chayim nishmotem Adonai hu nachlatam V'yanuchu v'shalom al mishkvotem v'nomar Amen.
We believe in the infinite worth of every soul. And it's our custom to say the mourner's Kaddish when we lose somebody, saying this memorial prayer for this one soul, what person that may have given us life or helped nurture us, someone we were close to. And this evening we say the Kaddish, the same prayer, not for just one soul who we knew, but for millions of souls who we didn't know. And if you know the mourner's Kaddish, please join me. If you don't, you can feel, even close your eyes and you can feel how the words, the rhythm kind of resonates with you. Yid Kadal, Yid Kadash, Shemei Rabbah, Ve'alma Divra Kirute, Ve'yamlich Malchute, Ve'chayechon Uvyomechon, Uvchaye Dechol Beit Yisrael, Bagala Uvisman Kariv V'imru, Amen. Yehe Shmei Rabbah Mivorach Leolam Omei Almaya, Yit Barach V'yishtabach V'yipa'ar V'yitromam V'yitnaseh V'yitadar V'yitaleh V'yitalal Shemei Dekudasha Berichu Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Ose shalom ben Ramav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who makes peace in the highest of places bring peace down for us and for all the people Israel everywhere and for all who dwell on earth. Amen. We also never give up hope, so I invite you to join us in Hatikva, the hope.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us tonight. Your presence, both in person and virtually, is meaningful and demonstrates commitment to preserving the memory and, most importantly, the universal lessons of the Holocaust. I want to thank all who helped make this possible. First, our donors and supporters, including Combined Jewish Philanthropies and the individual donors to the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies to this event in particular. All our participants, including PBD veterans groups, Representative Seth Moulton and President John Keenan, the SSU Community Chorus, the Applefield family, and the PBD Police Department. Special thanks to the production team who have worked multiple years with us. That includes Derek Barr and the ITS media staff at Salem State University, and Rick Preston and his team at Preston Events, and you've seen all the equipment around. They do a wonderful job every year and have become partners in this mission. Finally, I need to thank the staff of the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies, Lynn Blair and Regina Cajalina, who coordinated this event over the last 3 months. Thank you all. Drive safely, and good night.